Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're diving deep into a really challenging text from the 16th century. It takes a hard, critical look at a spiritual practice that a lot of people really hold dear, the idea of asking God for a sign.
So, this is the central question, right? The one our source material just forces us to confront. For centuries, people have looked for supernatural guidance, believing it actually strengthens their faith. But what if that very act, that deep desire for a special message, what if it's not just wrong, but actually dangerous? Well, this text argues that it is.
So let's start with the baseline, the common assumption. The author totally gets that for many, seeking signs feels like this deeply spiritual and positive thing to do.
I mean, this makes total sense, doesn't it? You ask for guidance, you feel like you get an answer, and so you figure, hey, this must be a good thing. God must be pleased. It feels like you've got this direct line, a confirmation of your faith. And this is the bedrock belief that our author is about to completely shatter.
And here we go. This is where the argument takes a really sharp turn. The author doesn't just kind of disagree with this practice, he claims it actively, deeply offends God.
Wow, just listen to the force of that language. Angered, deeply offended. This is not a gentle suggestion, this is a full-blown warning. The author is claiming that the very act of demanding a sign is a profound spiritual mistake. But why? What's the big deal?
Well, here's the reasoning. The author argues that God has already given us the tools we need to navigate the world, our natural reason and the established teachings of the faith. To go and demand a private, supernatural sign is basically to reject those gifts. It's like you're trying to force God's hand, to peek behind a curtain he himself put in place.
In this slide, it lays out the two paths perfectly. On one side, you've got God's ordained way. Use your brain, study scripture, rely on established doctrine, the collective wisdom of the faith. And on the other side, you've got this forbidden path, demanding private, extraordinary messages. The author sees this not as an act of faith, but as a kind of spiritual impatience, even pride.
So of course, this brings up a huge question, a total paradox. If God hates this so much, why does he sometimes seem to answer?
I bet this is the exact question that just popped into your head, and the author tackles it directly. It seems totally contradictory, right? If the behavior is so offensive, you'd think the response would just be silence. But that's not always what happens.
To explain this, the author uses this really powerful analogy. He compares God to a loving father. So imagine a father puts healthy, nourishing food on the table. He knows it's what's best, but one of his kids just stubbornly refuses it, demanding something else, something less wholesome. The father, kind of sadly, just gives the child what it wants to avoid a big scene, even though he knows it's not the best choice. That answered prayer for a sign, in this view, isn't a thumbs up from God. It's more of a sigh, God sadly giving in to his soul's weakness.
And to back this up, he pulls out a big example from the Old Testament, the story of the Israelites demanding a king. God says flat out that this displeases him. It's a rejection of his direct rule. And yet, he gives them a king anyway. See, the yes they get isn't a yes of approval. It's a yes of consequence.
But the author presents an even more chilling reason why these requests might get an answer. It's not always God, reluctantly or otherwise, on the other end of the line.
This is where the warning gets really, really dire. The author is claiming that when you open yourself up to this kind of supernatural inquiry, you are essentially opening a door, and you have no idea who or what might decide to walk through it. This desire for special knowledge, he says, creates a vulnerability that is just ripe for exploitation.
He describes a process that we could call demonic mimicry. And get this, it's not about spooky magic like we see in the movies. It's about a superior intellect using its vast knowledge of the natural world, of cause and effect, to make predictions that seem miraculous to our limited human minds.
So how does this actually work? Well, it's incredibly subtle. It shows up disguised as something good, a real wolf in sheep's clothing. It'll feed you a bunch of truths just to gain your trust, all so it can slip in one devastating lie. It can predict a plague because it sees the environmental conditions that cause it. It can predict a city's downfall because it sees the social decay that's going to lead to it. It's a master of deduction, not divination. And it preys on our very human desire to feel special, to know the future.
And here it is. This is maybe the most terrifying part of the whole argument. The author suggests that when a person stubbornly keeps going down this forbidden path, God might just step back. He withdraws his grace and simply allows the person to be deceived. In this view, the deception isn't just an attack, it's a judgment. It's the natural consequence of rejecting God's ordained path in the first place.
Okay, so after all those dire warnings, what's the solution? According to the 16th century writer, what is the safe, God-approved way forward?
The advice is uncompromising. It's clear. It's blunt. Stop. Stop asking for signs. Stop wanting visions. Stop looking for private, supernatural messages. Close that door completely, because the risk is just way too high.
And here's the final, crucial instruction. Trust the tools you've already been given. The author argues your guide should be your own God-given reason and the established public law of the gospel. And even if some seemingly supernatural truth comes your way, you have to test it against those two things. If it doesn't line up with reason and established teaching, you reject it, no matter how divine it feels.
You know, it's wild to think about. This is a 16th century text, but it's wrestling with a problem that feels so incredibly modern. We might not be worried about visions and locutions, but we are absolutely bombarded with charismatic leaders, compelling ideologies, and endless streams of information all claiming to have the real truth. The author's advice, to ground ourselves in reason and established principles, instead of chasing every new, private revelation, it feels surprisingly relevant. It leaves us with a critical question to ponder, not just about the past, but for our own time.